I used to think that if something terrible ever happened, all I had to do was dial 911. That the second my thumb hit the call button, someone somewhere would spring into action. That help was automatic. That's what they teach you in school, right? Call 911 and you'll be okay. But I was 15 tonight. I learned that wasn't always true. My name is Rachel Davis, and this happened in the fall of 2006 in a quiet neighborhood just outside Columbus, Ohio. I lived with my mom in a 2-story colonial house at the edge of a cul-de-sac. It was one of those neighborhoods where people still left their doors unlocked, where Halloween decorations stayed up too long, and neighbors waved even if they didn't know your name. It was a Thursday night. My mom worked the night shift as a nurse at Mount Carmel East Hospital. I had school the next day, but I'd convinced her to let me stay home alone instead of sleeping over at a friend's place like usual. I told her I had a history paper to finish and just wanted some peace and quiet. She kissed my forehead, told me to lock the doors, and was gone by 7:40 p.m. It started with a power flicker around 10:12. I remember that exact time because I was watching an old rerun of Law & Order, and the screen glitched mid-sentence. I thought it was just a blip, maybe the wind, maybe the grid, nothing serious. But then I noticed the hallway light didn't come back on, just the living room lamp. Everything else was dead. I stood up and peeked through the blinds. The street lamps were still on, so were the porch lights of the neighboring houses. Just us. That was the first moment my stomach dropped. I walked into the kitchen and flipped the light switch a few times. Nothing. Then I noticed it. The back door was open. Not wide open, just cracked. Maybe an inch or two, but wide enough that I could see the porch light through the gap. I froze. For at least 10 seconds I didn't breathe. I couldn't move. Then I ran, straight to the hallway drawer, where Mom kept the emergency flashlight. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely flick the switch on. I grabbed the house phone off the wall and dialed 911. I never heard the ring. There was just silence, like I had dialed into a dead line. Then a strange tone, not a busy signal, just a single beep, high and unnatural, followed by static. Then horrifyingly a click. I slammed the phone back onto the cradle and bolted upstairs. I locked myself in my bedroom and grabbed my cell phone. I had only one bar, but I tried 911 again. This time it rang. One ring, two, then nothing. My phone dropped the call. I tried again. Same thing. Then my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. It read, "You should have stayed at Emily's." I dropped the phone. My ears were ringing. My brain tried to make sense of it. Only 2 people knew I was supposed to sleep over at Emily's. Emily herself and my mom. I called Emily. No answer. I called again. Voicemail. I sent her 3 texts in a row. "Are you home? Did you tell anyone I'm here alone? Please answer. Someone is in my house." No reply. I could hear movement downstairs now. Not footsteps, something softer, like shoes sliding slowly across tile. Whoever it was, they weren't in a hurry. That scared me more than anything. I crawled into my closet and shut the door. I was still holding the flashlight, but I turned it off. I wanted darkness, safety, invisibility. My heart was thumping so loud, I was convinced whoever was downstairs could hear it through the walls. Then another message buzzed through. "It's rude not to answer when someone's trying to talk to you." I wanted to scream. Instead, I covered my mouth and curled up smaller, trying to breathe without sound. I remembered something. Mom's old Nokia was still in her nightstand drawer. That thing had full bars even when nothing else did. I opened the closet slowly, crawled across my bedroom floor like it was made of glass, and crept into hers. The second I opened her nightstand drawer, the floorboard behind me creaked. I froze. So did the sound behind me. Then another creak. Closer. Deliberate. I lunged, grabbed the Nokia, and dove under her bed, punching 911 as I went. 3 rings. Then a voice. 911. What's your emergency? I was sobbing. There's someone in my house. I'm 15. I'm alone. Please help me. Stay on the line. The dispatcher said, calm and direct. We've traced your location. Officers are en route. Do not make a sound. Then, horrifyingly, her voice vanished. The line went dead again. The Nokia screen went dark. I held back a scream with everything I had. Then a whisper came from under the bed. Not from the phone, from the darkness behind me. I told you not to use the phone. I don't remember making a conscious decision to move. My body just reacted. I scrambled out from under the bed, so fast, I scraped my knees raw. I bolted out of my mom's room, down the hallway, and slammed my door shut behind me. I twisted the lock and pushed my desk against it. I was sobbing now. The kind of sob that doesn't sound like crying. It's more like choking. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. There was a person in my house, in my room, whispering to me, under the bed I'd just been in. I backed into the corner of my room and held the dead phone like it was a weapon. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Climbing the stairs. One at a time. That's when the pounding started. Not from the stairs, but my heart. I could hear blood rushing in my ears. I grabbed my phone again and texted Emily. Please call 911 for me. Someone's in my house. They're coming upstairs. No answer. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, then stopped. I knew whoever was standing just outside my bedroom door. Listening, I covered my mouth with both hands. And then nothing. No knock. No voice. Just complete silence for almost a full minute. Then, click. The doorknob turned slowly. I heard the lock stop it, but only once. It was almost polite, like they were just testing, not trying. Not yet. That's what terrified me the most. The restraint. Then something slid under the door. A piece of paper. I stared at it for a long time before moving. I didn't want to touch it. Didn't want to get closer. But eventually, I couldn't stop myself. I tiptoed to the door and picked it up. For words, scrawled in thick black ink. No one is coming. At that exact moment, I heard something outside. A chirp. A short, high sound. Then headlights flashed through my window. A police cruiser. I almost collapsed with relief. I wanted to scream for help, but I stopped myself. What if this person wasn't alone? What if they were still right outside my door listening? I could hear the car doors slam shut outside. Footsteps on gravel. Then someone knocked on the front door, hard and fast. Columbus Police. Is anyone inside? I shouted. I'm here. Upstairs. Please help me. Seconds later, wood splintered. The sound of boots storming through the house. Heavy, hurried steps pounding up the stairs. 3 officers burst through my bedroom door within seconds. Guns drawn. One of them pulled me into the hallway while the others cleared the house. They searched every room, every closet. They even checked the crawl space. No one. The back door had been pried open with something flat. A crowbar, they guessed. But no one was inside now. No fingerprints. No footprints. Nothing was stolen. Nothing vandalized. But someone had definitely been there. When I told them about the piece of paper, they found it by my door. The handwriting was smeared. Almost illegible now. But it was real. I was real. They tried to trace the texts, but the number was unregistered. A burner phone, they said. Probably prepaid. Probably tossed in a dumpster by now. They let me stay with a neighbor until my mom came home. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after, or for weeks, really. What haunts me isn't that someone broke in. It's that they planned it. They knew my mom's schedule. They knew I was home alone. They knew my power was cut. And they knew which phone would actually work. The police never found out how they jammed the 911 landline. They said it might have been a signal scrambler, something not easy to get unless you knew what you were doing. The strangest part? A week later, Emily finally texted me back. She swore she never got my calls or messages that night. She said she'd been grounded, phone taken away. But she told me something else that made my skin crawl. That same night, around 10:30 p.m., someone had knocked on her door. Her mom answered. A man in a brown delivery jacket asked if Rachel was staying over. When her mom said no, he just smiled and walked away. They thought nothing of it at the time, until I told them everything. The case was never solved. To this day, I check every lock. I sleep with my phone fully charged. And I never, ever assume that calling for help means someone's actually coming. Because sometimes, they've already made sure you'll never get through. I've lived in Tempe, Arizona my whole life, and not once had I ever felt unsafe. I grew up in a quiet cul-de-sac where everyone knew each other, and most of us never even locked our doors during the day. It wasn't until I was 24, living alone in a small rental duplex, that I learned how fast safety can disappear. It started with small things. A glass left on the kitchen counter that I didn't remember using. A spoon in the sink I was sure I hadn't touched. My laundry moved from the dryer to the basket, folded. At first, I chalked it up to forgetfulness. Maybe I was sleep deprived. Maybe I was losing track of things. It was only when I found a cigarette, but in my bathroom sink, and I don't smoke, that I started to worry. I changed my locks that day, told my landlord. He brushed it off, said maybe the maintenance guy was confused and went into the wrong unit. But I knew that wasn't it. Who smokes in someone else's bathroom and doesn't even flush the ashes? I bought a cheap indoor camera from Walmart, put on top of my bookshelf facing the front door. The red recording light blinked reassuringly. That night, I slept uneasy. I didn't have long to wait. The very next evening, after work, I got a motion notification on my phone. The timestamp was 3:47 p.m. I hadn't been home until after 6. I opened the app and watched. The front door creaked open slowly. A man stepped inside. Not a burglar. Not some panic drug addict. He looked calm. He wore a gray hoodie, jeans, and gloves. He shut the door quietly behind him, walked into the living room, sat on my couch, and just sat there for 30 minutes. He didn't steal anything, didn't snoop. He just waited and then left. My heart was hammering in my chest. I was watching this from the safety of my friend Marissa's house. I'd already gone over to vent, not knowing what I'd find on the camera. We called the police immediately. They arrived at my place within 10 minutes. But there was no sign of forced entry. The windows were locked. The door was locked. Nothing had been damaged or tampered with, except one thing. The latch on the small side window in my laundry room. It wasn't broken, but it had been picked. They said it was an old model, easy to bypass with a thin wire or even a credit card. That window was on the shaded side of the house. No cameras outside. No neighbors on that side either. The scariest part was what they found in the attic. Someone had been staying up there. There was a blanket, an empty water jug, snack wrappers, and a small battery-powered lamp. But it gets worse. Whoever had drilled a hole about the size of a dime into the ceiling vent above my bed. When the officers showed me, I felt the ground disappear beneath me. They said it's rare, but not unheard of. A squatter, a stalker, someone who finds a way into the attic and just lives there, hiding, watching. They never caught him. He vanished after that. Must have seen the police lights and ran. But for months after, I couldn't sleep. I left every light on, moved in with a coworker. I'd wake up gasping in the night, thinking I heard footsteps above my bed. I don't know if he ever came back. But I know this. When people tell you to trust your gut, believe them. If something feels off in your own home, if something seems moved or unfamiliar, don't explain it away. Someone was in my home, and if I hadn't bought that $30 camera from Walmart, I might never have known. It was a Thursday night in northern Michigan, late October, and the kind of cold that gets into your bones. I had just put my daughter to sleep. She was 5 at the time, and was enjoying a rare moment of silence with a cup of tea and an old Hitchcock movie playing softly in the background. My husband was on a business trip in Chicago. 3 days down, 2 more to go. At around 11:40 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Not a tap. Not the hesitant kind of knock you expect from a lost traveler or a neighbor. No, this was firm, sharp, deliberate. I froze. We live far from the city, surrounded by woods and a few scattered neighbors. No one knocks this late unless something is wrong, or very, very wrong. I didn't move, just waited. Then came a second knock, more aggressive. I turned off the TV. Stillness. My heart was thudding now, and I instinctively glanced at the baby monitor next to me. My daughter was still peacefully asleep. I crept toward the door. No lights on, just the dim glow of the porch bulb. Through the peephole, I saw a man standing in a gray coat, hood pulled low, hands tucked in his pockets. He wasn't moving, just standing, watching the door. I didn't recognize him. I backed away from the peephole slowly. My phone was in the kitchen. I grabbed it with shaking hands, dialed 911. The dispatcher picked up, and that's when I heard it, his voice. Low, muffled through the door, but unmistakable. He said my name. Rachel. I froze. He said it again. Rachel, I know you're awake. I whispered into the phone, and the dispatcher calmly told me to stay put, that a patrol car was already nearby and on its way. Then he said something else. Your daughter's pretty when she sleeps. My knees almost buckled. He knew we were inside, knew about her. I ran to the bedroom. She was still there, safe, untouched, but I locked the door behind me and pressed my back against it. The seconds felt like hours. The dispatcher stayed on the line, kept me calm. Then came the sound of tires on gravel outside. Flashing lights. The man ran. I heard the footsteps pounding against the porch down the path into the woods. Police searched for 2 hours, but he vanished into the trees. No trace. They stayed with us the rest of the night. When morning came and daylight poured in, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. Tucked under a stone by our front step was a folded piece of paper. It just said, "You lock your windows at night, but not the ones upstairs." He had been watching us for a while. Probably knew my husband was out of town. Probably waited for the right moment. And the worst part? They never caught him. No fingerprints. No footage. Nothing. Just the knowledge that he'd been that close. Close enough to learn our habits, our names, our fears. We moved a month later. I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. Couldn't let my daughter sleep in her room without checking every lock twice. It's been 6 years. I still check the upstairs windows every night. And I still wonder what would have happened if the police had taken 1 minute longer to get there. It was late summer in 2015 when it happened. My wife, Carla, and I had just moved into a new home on the outskirts of Boise, Idaho. The house was old but charming, surrounded by thick trees and a large backyard. The perfect place for a quiet life away from the city. Or so we thought. We'd only been there a few months, but already we had settled in. The backyard was our little sanctuary, especially in the evenings when the sun was setting behind the mountains. We'd sit out there on the deck, drinking iced tea and enjoying the peace and quiet. But it wasn't always peaceful. One night, about 2 weeks after we moved in, I was sitting on the porch alone, watching the stars when I noticed something strange. There was a figure standing at the far end of our yard, just beyond the tree line. I thought it was a shadow at first, maybe just a trick of the light. But then I saw it move. A person. A man. Tall, wearing a dark jacket, standing completely still, watching the house. I called out to Carla, but when I looked back, the figure was gone. I shrugged it off. Maybe it was just someone passing by. Or maybe it was a neighbor. We had a few houses nearby, and the land was thick with trees. But the next night, it happened again. I was sitting out there, and once again I saw him. The same man, standing in the same spot, watching us. This time, I jumped up and ran inside to grab my phone. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, the man was gone. No sign of him anywhere. The officers were nice, but told me it was probably just someone trespassing, and that it wasn't uncommon in rural areas. They assured me that they would patrol the area more frequently, but didn't feel right. Not all. For the next few days, I made sure to keep the lights on outside at night, and I kept an eye on the yard. I even set up a few security cameras just in case. But the thing that really scared me came a few nights later. Carla and I were in bed, asleep, when I was jolted awake by the sound of someone moving around in the backyard. I listened carefully, the distinct sound of footsteps, then a loud crack like a branch breaking. I grabbed my phone and checked the camera feed. I almost couldn't believe what I saw. The same man was standing by the fence, his face turned toward the camera. His eyes were wide open, and he was staring directly at the house. I called 911, my heart pounding in my chest. The dispatcher told me to stay inside, lock the doors, and wait for the police. I watched, frozen, as the man slowly began to move toward the house. By the time the police arrived, the man was gone again. They searched the yard, but there was no sign of him. No footprints, no broken branches. Just an eerie emptiness. We installed better lighting around the yard. The next few weeks were quieter, but every night, I still couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Then came the worst part. A few weeks later, I was in the yard, cleaning up some leaves. I didn't think much of it, just another normal day. That was until I bent down to pick up a piece of trash and found something stuck in the grass. A note. It was folded, simple, and handwritten. It read, "I know what you did last summer." The words chilled me to my core. It was as if the man had been watching us for longer than I had realized. As if he had been there all along, waiting for the perfect moment. We moved a month later. We couldn't stay there anymore. The fear had seeped into everything. The walls, the windows, the doors. We never found out who the man was, and I still don't know why he targeted us. But I do know this. I'll never take my safety for granted again. If someone is watching you from the shadows, Trust your instincts. Take the precautions you need. It only takes one person to change everything. And sometimes, the scariest part isn't knowing who they are, but how close they can get without you ever realizing. I never thought much about home security. My house was in a safe neighborhood, or so I thought. Sure, we had some petty thefts here and there, but nothing that would make you lose sleep at night. But everything changed in 2018. It was a Friday evening in early June, the kind of night where the warmth of the day still lingers even after the sun sets. My wife, Emily, and I were finishing dinner talking about our plans for the weekend. Our daughter, Lily, was upstairs in her room, probably playing with her dolls. Everything seemed normal, peaceful, until the knocking started. At first, it was light, just a tap-tap on the front door. I didn't think much of it, maybe a neighbor or a delivery person. But then, the knocking came again. Harder, louder, more urgent. I got up to answer it, but as I walked down the hallway toward the front door, something in my gut told me that something wasn't right. I hesitated for a second, peeking through the peephole. Nothing. No one was standing there. Just the dark porch, empty and still. But then a voice, muffled, coming from the other side of the door. "I know you're in there." My heart skipped a beat. It was a man's voice. Low, unfamiliar. But the words, the way he said them, like he knew exactly who we were, exactly where we were. I stepped back, my mind racing. Should I call the police? Should I open the door? Before I could make up my mind, the knocking came again. But this time it was different. It wasn't just at the door. It was on the windows. One by one, the sound of knocking moved around the house like he was circling it. I could hear the distinct tapping, the way the glass rattled with each knock. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher told me to stay inside, lock all doors and windows, and wait for officers to arrive. But as I spoke to them, I couldn't shake the feeling that the man wasn't just knocking. He was watching. He was standing right outside, listening to everything. Suddenly, the knocking stopped. An eerie silence fell over the house. I waited, my eyes darting to the windows, to the shadows outside. Then, I heard it quiet, almost imperceptible but unmistakable. Breathing. It was coming from the side of the house, just beyond the window I had been staring out of a moment before. I couldn't see anything, but I knew someone was there. Someone was watching. I grabbed Emily, pulled her into the closet with Lily. I locked the door and held my breath. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time felt like it had stopped. Then I heard the sirens. The police arrived, and after what felt like an eternity, they cleared the house. They searched the yard, the nearby trees, and the street. But the man was gone. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken glass, nothing out of place. The officers told us it was likely a prank, maybe some kids messing around. But I didn't believe them. The way he spoke, the way he seemed to know exactly where we were, it didn't sit right. That night, we didn't sleep. Not a single minute. For the next few weeks, I kept checking the windows, double-locked the doors, and even set up security cameras around the property. But every time I looked outside, I had that feeling. That feeling that someone, somewhere was watching me. Watching us. One morning, about a month later, I went out to get the mail. When I reached the mailbox, I found a letter. No return address, just a plain envelope. Inside was a single sentence, handwritten, "I'm still here and I'm not leaving." I froze. I turned, looked around, but there was no one. No car, no footsteps in the dirt, nothing. But I knew he had been there. We moved shortly after that. I couldn't risk staying there any longer. I didn't trust the house. I didn't trust the area. And I didn't trust that someone wouldn't come back. It's been 3 years now, and though I live in a different place, I still check the windows at night. I still double-check the locks. And sometimes when I walk past a dark corner or hear a creak in the walls, I can't shake the thought that he's out there, watching, waiting. And I wonder, if I hadn't answered the door, if I hadn't picked up the phone, would things have gone differently? I'll never forget the day it all started. It was the summer of 2012, and my family had just moved into a house in the suburbs of Chicago. It was a quiet neighborhood, the kind where everyone knew each other's names, where people waved as they walked their dogs, and kids played basketball in driveways. It seemed safe, like nothing could ever go wrong here. My next-door neighbor, Mr. Wilkins, was an older gentleman, probably in his late 60s. He had lived in his house for as long as anyone could remember. tall, thin, and always impeccably dressed in a suit, even on weekends. He seemed like the kind of guy who had lived a quiet, peaceful life. Every morning, he would sit on his porch and watch the world go by, his old, gray dog by his side. But something was off about him, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It was around 3 months after we moved in that I started noticing strange things happening. I would see Mr. Wilkins standing in his front yard, staring at our house. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, his eyes fixed on the windows. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe he was just lost in thought. But then I realized it was happening almost every day at the same time. One evening, I decided to confront him. I walked over to his porch and knocked on his door. When he answered, he looked a little disoriented, like he hadn't expected anyone to come by. "Is everything okay, Mr. Wilkins?" I asked. "You've been standing outside a lot lately." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just enjoying the view," he said, his voice a little too calm. "I've lived here a long time. Lots of memories. I didn't think much of it. Maybe I was being paranoid. But over the next few weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right." Mr. Wilkins seemed more and more distant, and his behavior became increasingly odd. Sometimes I would see him standing in his front yard again, but this time he would be staring at the same spot, right at my front door. I asked my wife if she had noticed anything strange, and she had. She said she had caught him staring through the window once, his face pressed up against the glass. When she opened the curtain, he quickly backed away, pretending like he wasn't there. We began keeping a closer eye on him, just to be safe. But then things escalated. One night around 2 a.m., I heard a noise coming from outside. I went to the window to check, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Mr. Wilkins was standing in the middle of my front yard, his hands clasped in front of him, his eyes wide open and unblinking. He wasn't moving. He was just staring at the house. I quickly backed away from the window and called my wife. "He's out there again," I said, my voice shaking. "Something is wrong with him." She told me to call the police, but before I could, I heard a knock on the door. I froze. I peeked through the peephole, and sure enough, Mr. Wilkins was standing there, his face expressionless. His suit was wrinkled, and his tie was hanging loosely around his neck. "Mr. Wilkins, what are you doing here?" I asked, opening the door crack. His eyes seemed vacant, almost empty. "I just wanted to see how you're doing," he said softly, his voice eerily calm. Before I could respond, he turned and walked away without another word. I was unsettled, but still, I didn't call the police. Maybe I was overreacting. After all, he was just an old man, right? But then, the next morning, something even stranger happened. Mr. Wilkins was gone. Just gone. His house was completely empty. The lights were off, the shutters were closed. There was no sign of him anywhere. I knocked on his door, but no one answered. I went around back to check, but his backyard was also empty. The house was silent. I called the police, but they said they had no reports of anything unusual. They told me it was probably just a case of him going away for a while, but I knew that wasn't it. Mr. Wilkins had lived in that house for decades. He didn't just leave. Weeks went by, and no one heard from him. His house remained abandoned, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, somewhere, watching us, waiting. Then, one night, about a month later, I woke up to the sound of scratching at my front door. I got up and looked through the peephole, but there was no one there. I opened the door, half expecting to see a trick-or-treater or some prankster. But instead, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A note was taped to the door. It simply read, "I'm still here. You next." I never saw Mr. Wilkins again. His house was eventually sold, and the new owners moved in. But to this day, I don't know what happened to him. The police never found any trace of him, and the house remained empty for years before it was finally sold. I don't know if he was just an old man who lost his mind, or if there was something more sinister going on. But the way he acted, the way he would watch us, it never felt right. And sometimes late at night, I swear I still see him, standing in the shadows, just out of view, watching. It was the kind of neighborhood you'd find in an old movie, a quiet, sleepy street, lined with trees and homes that all looked the same. I had lived in my house for about 3 years, and I had grown accustomed to the peaceful rhythm of the area. Every evening, the sound of crickets chirping would fill the air, and the occasional dog barking in the distance was all you'd hear. But one night, everything changed. It started with a phone call. I was sitting in my living room, watching TV when the landline rang. Now, I wasn't someone who used the home phone much. Most people had cell phones these days, but I picked up anyway. Hello. I answered, expecting it to be a wrong number or a telemarketer. There was silence on the other end. Hello. I said again, this time a little louder. Then, a voice came through, soft and almost breathless. Are you alone? I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't recognize the voice, and the way it trembled sent a wave of unease through me. Who is this? I asked, trying to stay calm, but there was no answer. The line went dead. I hung up, shaking my head. It was probably a prank. Maybe someone thought it would be funny to mess with me. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Over the next few days, I thought about that phone call. Who could it have been? Why did they ask if I was alone? Then, on the fourth night after the call, I was woken up in the middle of the night by the sound of my front doorbell ringing. It was just after midnight. I glanced at the clock, confused. Who could be ringing my doorbell at this hour? I got out of bed, tried to ignore the feeling of dread creeping up my spine. Maybe it was a neighbor, maybe someone needed help. I grabbed my robe and went downstairs. As I reached the doorbell rang again. I peeked through the peephole. No one was there. My heart started to race. I felt a strange sense of unease, like I was being watched. I opened the door slowly, half expecting to see no one there at all. Nothing. I stood on my porch, scanning the darkness, but I couldn't see a thing. I stepped outside, the cool night air hitting my skin. Then, I heard it, a faint sound, barely audible, coming from the side of the house. I crept around the corner, my mind racing. What was going on? Who was out there? As I turned the corner, I froze. Standing at the edge of my yard was a man. He was tall, wearing a hooded sweatshirt, his face hidden in shadow. He was standing still, staring at my house. Not moving, not speaking, just watching. I called out, my voice trembling. Who are you? What do you want? The man didn't respond. Instead, he took a single step toward me, his slow, deliberate movements making my heart beat faster. I backed away, reaching for my phone in my pocket. I dialed 911, my fingers shaking. Please, someone's in my yard, I whispered. The man didn't seem to care. He just kept walking toward me, his steps deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. When I glanced back at the door, I saw a shadow moving inside. I wasn't sure if it was my imagination or something worse, but I didn't have time to think about it. I ran back toward the house, slamming the door shut behind me. I bolted the lock, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over me. The police arrived just minutes later, and when they searched the area, they found no sign of the man. He was gone, disappeared into the night without a trace. But then the officers did something that made my blood run cold. They checked my phone records and confirmed that I had received a call just before the man appeared at my door. The call had been made from a phone number registered to the house directly across the street from mine. I had no idea what to think. The man who had been standing in my yard, he was from the house across the street? But why? What did he want from me? I never found out. The family who lived across the street moved out the very next week. No one ever spoke to me about it, and to this day, the house remains empty. I still get chills when I think back to that night. The phone call, the doorbell ringing, and that man standing in the dark, watching me. Was he planning something? Was it all just a sick game? I'll never know. But I can't shake the feeling that the man wasn't alone. And I still wonder, late at night, when I hear a phone ring or a doorbell chime, if he's watching again.